In the heart of an unrecognizable frozen city, where all infrastructure has completely collapsed and every mode of transportation is at a standstill, an urgent report comes in. Earth has rapidly entered a new ice age. Braving the intense cold, a courageous correspondent struggles to deliver the news, his microphone freezing more with each passing second. He informs the world that global temperatures will continue to plummet with no end in sight. But he urges the public not to give up hope. Balling his fist, he projected confidence that the government had not forgotten about its citizens in these tough times. That as long as they stand together, the people of this strong nation will overcome this daunting crisis. Just as he was about to spiel more unity propaganda to quell the masses, a whole-ass frozen airplane made a crash landing in the middle of the city, plowing through the reporter and his whole crew. A man watched this final shot of the last news broadcast covered by the remaining TV station in the country. He watched it on a miserably frozen screen. After that plane crash landed on top of the remaining news network team, the TV finally cut into static. No more overcast news coverage of what's happening outside. The room of our protagonist, Han Feng, painted a picture of someone who tried to fight but finally gave up. He did not even bother cleaning up the mess of what little supplies he had left. The area around his entrance is filled with boxes of useless stuff and dwindling provisions. Outside, someone had been knocking quite hard and calling his name in a panic. Finally hearing the incessant calling of his name, Han Feng stood up from his filthy, frozen apartment, took a steel bat modified with some nails, traces of blood still visible on its surface, and walked towards the door. Han Feng was gaunt. He had the combination of the thickest possible winter wear, but it was not enough to stave off the cold. He slowly and carefully peeked at the peephole to see who was on the other side of the door. Who he saw shocked him. It also excited him a little bit. It was a woman he was very familiar with before the Ice Age even kicked in. She also had her thickest winter wear on, but standing outside, exposed to the elements, made her face red and her body shiver uncontrollably. Han Feng opened the door with a slight flush on his face. The woman's name is Hyona, and he has no idea what she is doing outside of his door. Still holding the bat, he urged her to come inside where it was warmer and safer. These days, the outside world has turned into a dangerous, lawless land. Hyona swung the door open wider to enter Han Feng's relatively safer room. The next thing you know, she was already grabbing him by the collar and pushing her lips onto his. Her little bonnet even fell with how fast she moved. Han Feng was surprised, but he did not pull back, and his cheeks got even redder. This deep and passionate kiss went on for way too long, if you ask me. But let our boy get some of that sloppy kiss action in the middle of an abandoned hallway outside his home. When they separated, both Han Feng and Hyona were breathing heavily, their tongues still out, spit still dribbling. The world is ending, and this is what they're doing. Totally understandable. Realizing what just happened, Han Feng pulled back and asked what had gotten into this woman that she would just grab him and kiss him the second he opened the door. Still trying to catch her breath, she confessed that she had a realization that Han Feng was the man that she truly loved all this time. Tears were starting to form in the corner of her expressive eyes while telling him that he was the one she was supposed to be with all along. It takes a crisis to see someone's true colors, to see who really cares for you, who will be there for you, no matter how hard things get. Speaking of hard, Hyona wanted to prove that what she was saying was the truth by taking Han Feng's hands and putting them against her chest to feel how fast her heart beating. She promised that she would be willing to do anything just so they could be together now. Hearing the word anything wiped out any semblance of rationality in our boy's brain. All the red flags turned green. To finally seal the deal, Hyona started pressing her thighs against Han Feng's flagpole while grinding and pulling him closer. He did not stand a chance at all. The world might be encased in ice and supplies might be low, but he was heating up like never before and something was rising in the lower regions. Han Feng looked at Hyona's eyes as she caressed his cheeks tenderly. He confessed that those words she just said meant the world to him. However, the door frame is not the right place for them to continue this. Hyona gently shushed him so he would not say another word. All she wants right now is for Han Feng to close his eyes and feel the moment. Against his logical mind, Han Feng did what she asked. Now that his eyes were closed, he asked what was supposed to happen next. Well, that's when another guy comes in, gripping the door ominously. This mystery guy swung the frozen door wide open, locked onto Han Feng's head, and smashed a blunt weapon with killing intent. Poor Han Feng did not see it coming. His skull was crushed while his eyes were closed. It was a bloody and brutal mess. A cruel sneak attack splattered blood all over the apartment entrance. Hyona and the mystery man entered the apartment. She shivered and stuttered, seemingly shocked that her partner in crime would actually kill Han Feng. The man scoffed and told her to stop playing innocent, for she knew this was the only way this encounter could go. The world went to hell a long time ago. One less mouth to feed is not going to change anything. Enough about dwelling on the brutal attack. It's time to see what this Han Feng chump has been hoarding. If they play their cards right, they might even get enough supplies to survive until rescue comes. The messed up part was that Han Feng did not die immediately. He lay down on the freezing cold ground, trembling in agony, while all the blood that he was not really clear as to what happened. But he could not move. Maybe it has come. Perhaps he was finally dying. He can finally know what it feels like to lose his life. The last thing he saw was the mystery man and that evil witch, Hyona, flirting a few meters away from his limp body. He's been touching her in places he could only dream of as he promises to reward her for her best actress performance that made the whole operation possible. As Han Feng's eyes closed for good, the hatred he felt for that cold-hearted felt unbearably heavy. He swore that if there was a next life, he would never let himself be a lovesick puppy again. In the empty darkness that he was plunged into, Han Feng started seeing little droplets of light. It started from a little speck that started growing into something bigger and more substantial. As it got even brighter, Han Feng started questioning what the hell was happening. He subconsciously extended his arm. His skin was translucent, like it was an entirely different entity. The warm light attracted him after suffering through the endless cold of the real world. May this be the path to heaven, but the golden light suddenly changed its color to red. Now what kind of heaven has this crimson color? After being baited by the golden light and trying to reach out for it, Han Feng, or at least an abstract construct of his body, felt his limbs getting shredded like he was being put through a meat grinder. Nothing goes well for this man. It did not take too long for the crimson light to cover his entire body as he let out a miserable scream of agony. His translucent frame disintegrates piece by piece. The dark nothingness was filled with his scattered essence. And Han Feng was gone. Still feeling the pain of getting ground and deconstructed atom by atom, he woke up in a cold sweat, screaming for his life. The pain was way too real. He was seduced into closing his eyes, bonked in the head for being too horny, died a depressing death, woke up in an empty void, got tricked into being torn from an atomic level, and now he doesn't know where he is. He looked around, and the sun shone bright through his balcony. His soft and comfortable bed was nice and clean. The air felt fresh as it lifted his curtains up. Han Feng was far from the cruel world he had gotten used to. It took him 30 minutes to absorb the wild things that had happened to him over the past few hours. He spent those 30 minutes reveling in the perfect view of the residential area overlooking his apartment. Han Feng could not get over the fact that the sun was shining again. He missed its warmth and its light. He thought that he would never feel this type of comfort and warmth ever again. He just checked the date, and it seems to be that it's the morning of June 28th. As far as he could remember. The Ice Age apocalypse will start on July 15th. He was supposed to die after being ambushed, but he was somehow brought back in time half a month before the end of civilization. In other words, he has been reborn and given the ultimate second chance. Aside from the memories he retained from the previous timeline, there is something different this time. Something strange was happening inside his body, and it might have manifested in his hands. Ever since he woke up, there's been a red glow wrapped around his right hand the whole time. He tried wiping it off, waving it away. But nothing made it disappear. It doesn't hurt. It just feels warm. It did not seem to do anything else aside from the light, and he thought that he was just imagining things at first. Han Feng must have stayed so long pondering what was happening on his balcony that he started sneezing. As he wiped his nose of the mess, he noticed that the red glow in his right hand had mysteriously turned to a green one. Then something happened that made him panic. The hand that was wrapped around by the green glow started getting bigger, growing in length as if his bones, flesh, and skin were stretching out. Anyone will freak out if they see their hands doing that. Afraid and confused, Han Feng stormed into his room and slammed the balcony door shut as fast as he could. He managed to make it inside before anything more drastic happened. He was huffing and puffing for air, but the hand seemed to have turned back to normal. The green glow was still there, though lingering and seemingly inexhaustible. Han Feng looked at it helplessly. There were beams of light shooting out of his hand. How would modern science even justify or explain a mysterious phenomenon like this after the lengthening incident outside? Now it's shrinking very slowly. The green light seems to be an erratic thing. It shrinks and grows unpredictably, not like the stationary red one at all. But that's still a mystery, too. Sitting down on his couch, Han Feng suddenly felt a pang of unbearable exhaustion. He hasn't done much aside from running back inside, but he feels drained. This might be connected to the green light. Frustrated, he started swinging his arms all over the place, trying to get a semblance of a clue as to what this really was. Then it hit him. Isn't this just like those MANHUA stories that he loves to read? He immediately sprinted to the kitchen and grabbed his sharpest knife. In those MANHUAs that he loves, the protagonist always starts their stories by being reborn. Just like them, maybe he will gain cheat-like powers. He wanted to test this out by grabbing the coolest thing he could imagine and posing with it. After a few minutes of waiting for something to happen, anything to change, Han Feng just scratched his head in shame as the sharp knife did not react with the light in his hand at all. He was so busy trying to find out if he had some fantastic cheat-like powers that he neglected his exhaustion and the rumbling of his stomach. He's just starving at this point. Unfortunately for him, the Han Feng of the past, who's clueless about the coming apocalypse, is a lazy bastard who does not even have a single piece of edible food in his fridge. This was getting bad. He had never felt so hungry before. If he does not eat something soon, he will most probably pass out at any second now. He turned his attention towards the living room, where a clear jar of soybean snacks was just sitting quietly. These roasted soybeans were just some leftover snacks he got before the apocalypse. It's not exactly a complete and filling meal, but it will have to do for now. It should tide the hunger before he hits up the supermarket later. He grabbed one of the roasted soybeans, unconsciously using his right hand, momentarily forgetting that it had the mysterious green light wrapped around it. Han Feng was too hungry to think of anything else, so he tossed the soybean right into his mouth, hoping to get some type of food into his system. As soon as the bean hit his tongue, a smoky explosion occurred right in his face. The fog it created almost covered his entire upper body. Much to his surprise, he was now munching on a beanstalk. It looked as though the roasted soybean had sprouted inside his mouth. He could feel the roots on his tongue, and the stalk itself extended outward. He pulled it out, and the plant left an earthy taste in his mouth. Out of all the bizarre events he's been going through lately, this might be near the top. He was just about to snack on some roasted soybeans, and now this happens. Moreover, he does not feel tired anymore. It seems like that explosion on his face erased the hungry sensation he was feeling. Looking down at his right hand, the green light has vanished too. Maybe all of this has something to do with what happened to the soybean. He plucked one of the pods in the stalk and examined it carefully. Opening the luscious green pod, he confirmed that it was just an ordinary fresh bean sprout. Maybe this is the power that he was daydreaming about. No matter what, this is undoubtedly an incredible discovery that should be studied more. Still, he can't really research anything while worrying about dying of hunger at any moment. Right now, he has a bigger fish to fry in the form of stocking up on supplies before the end of the world. As everyone knows, for the first time in a long time, Han Feng could walk out of his apartment to feel the sun on his skin and hear the birds sing. He could walk amongst the bustling crowd of people in the commercial district, minding their own business instead of holing up in their homes, fearing the cold. Han Feng was in deep thought as he walked to his destination. Let's get this straight. First, the red glow around his hand has turned to green. The green light shrinks and grows his limbs, making his heart beat faster and super tired. When he touched the soybean snacks, it sprouted into a whole stalk. Looking at his right hand with more questions than answers, he wonders just what kind of power has been bestowed upon him by who knows who. He continued his contemplative walks casually until he heard a familiar sweet voice calling his name that would have melted him before, but would make his blood boil now. Han Feng did not realize it right away, and turned around to see who was calling him by name. It was that evil witch that got him brutally killed, Lee Hyona. She flashed her wide smile. Her makeup was on point, hiding her rotten personality. She asked if Hanfong was out shopping too. She even employed her expert witch tricks, appearing as pretty as humanly possible while commenting about how it's like fate that they ran into each other in this place. Hanfong hasn't really had the chance to digest everything that has happened yet. But seeing Lee Hyona out in the wild is starting to bring back the bitterness he held onto until his final breath. Lee Hyona used to be the goddess of his dreams for 3 long years. He was a simp that did everything in his power to make her happy. He did all that, knowing full well that he was nothing but just another fallback guy in the friend zone. No, he wasn't even in the friend zone. He was just a piggy bank. For all those years of devoting himself and his wallet to the wrong girl, he never would have thought that she would be the one that would get him killed. Before he could go out of control, Hanfeng pinched himself to stay grounded and calm. It took every bit of his willpower to do so. Thinking rationally now is not the time to take his revenge. Not yet, at least. First, he needs to take care of the supply problem, unless he wants to be miserable and hungry in the Ice Age again. Lee Hyona walked closer and waved her hand around his eyes while asking what he was spacing out for. This has never happened before. It used to be that just hearing her voice would make the poor sap swoon. Hanfeng swallowed his hatred for the witch and faked a smile as he apologized for being speechless and for how especially beautiful she looked today. She was just so radiant that he got a bit lost in the moment. Now that's more like it. Lee Hyona coyly laughed and asked when he got so smooth with his lines like that. Her lips lifted to a slight and confident smirk, thinking that he got this boy eating at the palm of her hands. So, she went for the heart kill shot with the most adorable pose in her arsenal. Lee Hyona invited Hanfeng to go shopping together, but they had run into each other anyway. Now, there is a limit to how much time Hanfeng could face her without losing control of his rage. So, he just walked on and apologized that they wouldn't be doing any shopping together today. Lee Hyona was stunned. This was not how it was supposed to go down. She was supposed to get some free stuff from a pathetic simp. While walking in the other direction, Hanfeng couldn't help but praise the girl's technique. But he won't fall for it. He won't be used as a personal ATM again. He's not that foolish anymore. So, he went straight to the spot where he could get everything he needed. Waldemar Shopping Plaza. This Waldemar in a city is the most extensive and most well-stocked supermarket in the eastern region. It's like Walmart, but that brand's copyrighted. Of course, when the Ice Age hits, this place will be cleaned out overnight. Back in the previous timeline, nobody ever found out just who did it and how. Hanfeng had already started his shopping spree and filled up one cart with goods. He needs to stock up as much as possible before society crumbles under the sheer cold. He consulted some internet forums about some generic apocalypse survival guide, and it was surprisingly helpful. Scrolling through, he listed down the things he'd need, like food, winter clothes, medicine, daily necessities, fuel, tools, transportation, and even weapons. There's a lot to prepare. But he was so pumped to get some supplies that he forgot to take the more significant problem at hand. His personal wallet's current balance was a measly 15,000 yuan, equivalent to a little more than 2,000 ist. How was he supposed to secure a safe and comfortable life in the icy apocalypse with only this much? He's going to need a lot more cash for everything that he will need. At that moment, a message notification popped up on his phone. A notification that might be Heaven's way of telling him to calm down. The message came from an organization called Money Jar Loans, congratulating him on his approved eligibility to take out a loan up to 168,000 yuan, or a little more than 23,000 USA. A light bulb dinged inside his mind. There was no need to panic when it came to funds. How could he forget that the convenience of technology had brought him an infinite money glitch? There are dozens of money-lending apps that require minimal requirements to get a loan approved for those who are desperate for cash. They're incredibly predatory, but burying himself in debt doesn't matter, as he won't have to pay them back after the apocalypse goes into full swing. Out in the commercial district, some lady was angrily kicking an empty soda can on the curb. She's obviously upset about something. It turned out to be Lee Hyona. She looks like she is not in the best mood at all. Her eyes were full of toxic vitriol as today. One of her many simps dared to refuse to take her shopping when she got all dolled up to get spoiled. She was seriously pissed off that Han Feng would just take off like that without letting her deplete his bank account like a worthless leech. She started insulting the guy in her mind for being a pathetic loser who doesn't even own a car. Lee Hyona vowed never to be nice to that simp again. Her angry walk was interrupted by some loud honking coming from the car coming up on the road. Curious, she turned around to see what's up. It looked like a brand new truck straight out of the dealership. It was still shiny and premium looking. Han Feng was lowering the windows in the driver's seat. He just pulled up to greet Hyona as he just happened to pass her by while she was doing a walk of shame along the commercial district. Seeing the new wheels, Hyona's vow to never be nice to Han Feng again has seemingly melted out of her mind. All she saw were brand new leather seats and the smell of cash. Han Feng hopped off. When asked if the car was his, he answered affirmatively, adding that he just got it earlier. She came up to the witch and made up some story about how his dad has been killing it in the United States, business-wise, so he got some cash to blow. He even added that he just got out of the airport after dropping off his old man. Lee Hyona's face lit up. The only thing that could make that happen would be the possibility of striking it rich. So, she took a deep breath and put her game face on for Han Feng. This is the second time that she's doing this today. She looked to the ground and started trembling lightly. Knowing that Han Feng took his wealthy father to the airport today, she began apologizing for asking him to go shopping without knowing that he'd have a busy schedule. Then the waterworks came down. She started summoning those tears at the perfect time while meekly telling Han Feng that he was so cold to her earlier. She thought he was ditching a good friend. Han Feng smiled with satisfaction. This academy-worthy acting would have worked wonders with the previous him, but things are different now. He could see through it all. This silly girl was a pro. He did not hesitate to hold her by the waist, pulling her closer. His other hand took hold of her chin, and they looked each other in the eye. Lee Hyona was taken aback by the fact that one of her simps was so confidently forward. Han Feng put on an acting masterclass himself, promising to never ditch her as she's way too important for him to do such a cruel thing. For a split second, there was an imperceptible twisted smile on her face, but she quickly wiped it off. Continuing with her sincere, sweet girl act, she brought out the big guns. Lee Hyona admitted that Han Feng's pretty special in her life too. She even invited him to have lunch and watch a movie today so she could get to know him better. Just as she was about to ask for his answer, Han Feng was already gone like the wind. It was the perfect, unnoticeable escape. Hyona was speechless. Her heartfelt confession was actually directed towards nothing but air. Han Feng was already tinkering with the piles of boxes in the back of his truck. He was playfully complaining about how he still has to carry so many things and how busy his schedule is. Clearly infuriated that her attack did not land, Lee Hyona tried her best to keep her sweet girl composure as she asked why he bought so much stuff. He replied that this much is nothing special. He just grabbed some things he likes. To torment the witch even further, Han Feng lied through his teeth and enthusiastically told her that he got a present for the lady too. Not wanting to overplay her hand, Lee Hyona waved goodbye as she walked in the direction of her home. She smiled and said that she was looking forward to that gift. As soon as she turned her back towards Han Feng, her supposed biggest simp, a sly smile appeared on her lips, proud of how she dealt with her piggy bank. On the other hand, Han Feng was just having fun messing with the witch. Knowing this woman, he knew that he couldn't let her find out about his little stockpile of supplies. All this stuff will be his ticket to surviving the apocalypse after all. Lee Hyona will just have to wait for her turn. Once the world ends, Han Feng will make sure that she gets what's coming to her. That mystery guy who bashed him on the head too. His anxiety about the incoming inevitable collapse of society is starting to melt. Han Feng is actually starting to look forward to what's coming now. The next day came, June 29th. Again, July 15th will be D-Day. It will be the beginning of the end. First comes the heavy snow, then the temperature will drastically plummet down to -20 degrees Celsius at an alarming rate. Over the next month after that, temperatures will continue to gradually drop day by day, reaching lows of up to -70 degrees Celsius. At that point, the world would be encased in ice and snow completely, making it almost impossible to go outside. The first thing that Han Feng secured was his bountiful food supplies. Aside from the sheer volume of stock, he also needs everything packed and sealed securely. He can't let the neighbors sense that something's going on. They can't suspect that he's hoarding copious amounts of food. This was tiring work. Some of the sensitive supplies had to be moved at night when no one was around. Han Feng doesn't trust anyone enough to help, so he has to do it on his own. Once the apocalyptic ice age starts, the power grid will be extremely unstable. That's where his newest purchase shines. A heavy-duty generator plus enough fuel to keep it running for a whole year at the very least. With power secured, he now has to consider the fatal consequence of the building's heating system stopping. He had to call in some specialized contractors to modify his home for independent heating. Han Feng also ordered some reinforced doors and windows while he was at it. He needed a dedicated room to store all the supplies that he had hoarded, so he used an empty bedroom for all the essentials. By the time he finished preparing everything listed in his little notebook of survival, it was already July 14th. Just one more day before the temperature plummets and everything descends to chaos. Next up on his list is the main event that he's been postponing out of uncertainty all this time. It is time to buckle down and actually study his mysterious ability. Han Feng made a home-cooked meal for dinner while pondering his survival in coming Ice Age apocalypse. When things get hard, relying solely on the supplies he has accumulated won't be enough. But he has a possible answer to this problem. His power to manipulate plants in some mystical way might be his only hope for a sustainable future. The meal he cooked featured soybeans as its main ingredient. That's right, the same beans he conjured from a single roasted snack using his ability. He racked his brain and tried so many gestures and possible triggers, but the lights hadn't come out yet. The activation is so random that finding the right trigger is nearly impossible. For now, it is time for a risky taste test. He needs to make sure the food conjured by his abilities is edible. Who knew that trying some beans would be so nerve-wracking? Han Feng got through half the plate of his beans with no apparent problems at all. Even the soy milk passed the taste and safety test. While chewing on his lunch, the confirmation that his ability could provide edible food was game-changing. At least this proved that he has the ability to theoretically spawn food. The next step is the harder and more trial and error based one. He needs to figure out how to actually use the red and green lights and make them appear according to his will. So far, he has only tried it on soybeans, but what would happen if he could use it on other things? Opening his newly stocked fridge, Han Feng steeled his resolve to experiment and see if his ability would work with other plants too. The testing period stretched from midday until the sun was about to set. Han Feng did not know that as he passed out in the middle of experimentation. As he slowly opened his eyes, he noticed that he was gripping something tightly in his right hand. A green vegetable of some kind. A massive broccoli. Slowly getting up from the floor, he could not be bothered by the absolute mess that was in his kitchen as the pain in his head was hellish. It felt like something was pounding from inside his skull. He has to take note of this sensation in the future. This power of his takes a severe toll on the mind and the body, and it cannot be used without restrictions unless he wants to pass out and wake up with a migraine every day. After getting up, he immediately got a spoonful of his beans to refuel again. He might have pushed himself to the limit today, but at least he learned something vital about this mysterious ability of his. A few hours ago, before he blacked out, he neatly arranged a diverse selection of produce on the kitchen floor. He tried using his power on a bunch of them after he managed to activate the green light. Some root crops like potatoes did not react to his green light at all for some unknown reason, but not all of them were duds. Some of the crops grew from the seeds into full-blown plants like the soybean stalks. Wheat was one of those, and some neither stayed the same nor grew into full-blown crops. They just exploded in his hands like mini-bombs. It was a frightening experience that caught Han Feng off guard. After those explosions, the plants would turn into a substance that looked like coal but was very light. This development was certainly outside of his expectations. Thankfully, he could find some decent use for these inedible black substances. They are used to heat the space like coal when put together in a container and lit up. Coming from a future where heat was a luxury, Han Feng would gladly take these little balls of warmth. No more worrying about staying warm in the future. After a bunch of explosions, he tried many more times and failed most of them. He just kept chucking those black balls into the bucket one by one. When he got into some seeds he bought, he chose to take a more meditative stance while forcing himself to focus on controlling his breathing. After a few minutes of intense concentration that left him sweating bullets, he finally got the most significant success in this experiment. A gigantic broccoli shockingly appeared in his grasp. Before his eyes gave out and his consciousness went lights off, he remarked that the success rate of this method was still way too random. Then his body hit the floor. Thankfully, he was sitting on the tiles already, so the fall wasn't too bad. Now he's awake and his belly is full of beans. He played around with the broccoli while thinking long and hard and still failing to find any patterns to this ability. But he can't give up. There has to be some kind of principle behind how this ability works. There are still too many unknowns, but he made some decent progress today. At least now he has some understanding of the activating conditions of the lights. Who would have thought that the key to activating the bizarre skill lies in his very own consciousness? All he has to do is enter a meditative trance. His method involves imagining himself out in nature in his bare form, free from the constraints of human civilization. In other words, buck naked. In his mind palace, he walks on the ground with bare feet. His soul's making direct contact with the soil where life grows. Sunlight kisses his skin as all life around him harmonizes. Just like Adam in the Garden of Eden, his body and mind are both part of the natural world. A peaceful resonance of all that has life. Once he enters that state of mind, he slowly opens his eyes and a familiar green glow appears once again. This ability of his is directly connected to his consciousness. Working from that concept, he could freely call on the green light. Now that he's done with all the plant samples with a low success rate, it's time to move on to a different type of specimen. The target of the second experiment would be all kinds of meats this time around. So he slowly brought his right hand wrapped with a green light towards a juicy slab of meat. He already half expected it, but it's still disappointing that there were no reactions at all. Maybe the green light only works on plants. Thinking that the gentle approach might not be effective, Han Feng grabbed his meat and squeezed hard while praying that his right hand would work its magic. After a few minutes, he had to accept that nothing would happen. You could see the defeat and dejection in his tired eyes. That was when he thought of the sensation he felt while meditating. In a trance, he could sense two distinct colors, the red and green lights. Throughout the experiments, he hasn't tried using the red one yet. Grasping the primary trigger function of his ability, he only has to concentrate on bringing that red light out of his consciousness. While still holding the meat, he closed his eyes and tried to reach for the other ability lying dormant inside his system. After a little while, a spark of red light finally made an appearance on his right hand. With that initial spark, the glow swiftly wrapped around his hand. Surprisingly, it also wrapped around the piece of meat. It looked like it was creating some sort of bubbling reaction at the meat's surface. A few seconds of intense concentration later, Han Feng opened his eyes to a putrid pile of hardened dark red sludge that looked like it came right out of hell as the red light subsided. He immediately threw that vile thing on the ground out of sheer disgust. You would undoubtedly do that too, in his position. Realizing that this disfigured sludge might provide some valuable insights, Han Feng crouched on the ground to observe it. He poked the thing, and it was a little squishy. So, this is how meats would react to the red light. It might look revolting, but the texture and overall feel point towards the possibility that the meat got cooked or something. Was this really all the red light can do? Heat things up? Stoves and pans could do the same thing, and they could produce more appetizing meals than whatever the hell this is. Han Feng refuses to believe that's all there is to it. Upon using his consciousness to trigger his abilities a fair bit amount, he could understand his capabilities on a deeper level. If he were to describe the red light sensation, it would be like a disintegration process. His next meat experiment looked a lot better than the first one. But if that's the case, understanding the underlying concepts of these two lights might be easier than he initially thought. He grabbed a bunch of soybeans from his bean pile and gripped them hard in his right hand. In his left hand was the red light and the cooked up meat. If the green light represents the evolution of matter, then the red light is the opposite, which would be disintegration. Since he's already testing out some confusing concepts, what would happen if he combined the green light grasping beans and the red light grasping meat? The result was an even bigger reaction than he was expecting. The combination produced a bright, blinding light between his hands. When the lights died down, it was revealed that his meat got a lot bigger as a result. The meat had been supersized, but where did the soybeans in his right hand go? Could it be that the two subjects merged together, producing this giant slab? Hanfeng meticulously inspected the big meat. No matter how you look at it, it's undeniably incredible. It looks, feels, and smells exactly like real meat, but even fresher somehow, gaining some confidence that he's getting a lot better at this superpower thing. He decided to go for some more experiments. After a few hours, he was back to square one once again. His kitchen floor was filled with charred remains of meat and crops. He frustratedly threw a tantrum and everything he tried failed miserably. Getting all that exasperation out of his system, Hanfeng sat up and took a deep breath. He'll just pause the experiments for now. He can always just take his time to figure out its deeper intricacies later. Anyway, today was still a productive one, even though he ended it on a bitter and charred note. Hanfeng can already see the future if he can just successfully master this mysterious power. There's no doubt about it. With infinite resources, he would be the man standing at the pinnacle of this post-apocalyptic world. It's his dream, so he could put some sweet muscles in his image. Speaking of power, he might have forgotten one of the most important aspects of survival. Food alone is not going to cut it in the coming days. He will be completely vulnerable with all this loot if he doesn't have a decent weapon to defend himself. He swiftly took the various crops littered around his floor. He has to hurry and find himself a weapon before the temperature goes on a nosedive. Looking out the window, it seems like the initial stages of the apocalypse have already started. Snow is beginning to fall from the skies. It's here. The public might think this is just a typical snowy evening, but it's not. Just like the previous timeline, it really is happening. The collapse of modern civilization is commencing. Heading outside, Hanfeng fears that the temperatures will drop to 45 below within the week. He needs a gun and fast. But buying a gun in this country is illegal. And he doesn't exactly have any connections to the criminal world. That's when he overheard a scandalous man yelling and boasting that he's a construction guy with millions riding on every project. The dude was bragging to a passerby that he knows the infamous Lao Wang from the Shigang Lida group. They're so close. They're practically brothers. Hanfeng thinks he's seen this thug before. A dumbass with an exaggerated fashion style, blinged out with jewelry of questionable authenticity, and over-the-top streetwear. A guy who offers everyone cigarettes for some reason. Around this area, people refer to this bleached-haired, cigarette-loving thug as Homeless Joe. Homeless Joe's real name is Lai Zi. He likes it when people call him Brother Lai, and he lives in Hanfeng's neighborhood. He's reputed to be in charge of contracting projects and knows everyone around the area. If you offer him some cigs, he won't accept any other brands as he only smokes Huazi. Other brands make him cough. He's always helping his big brother with projects and looks forward to going to saunas. In reality, this bum does not have a proper job. But he always acts so busy. You often see him walking around while on a call, shouting out deals worth 20 million or 10 million as if he wants everyone to hear how successful he is. The guy is a deadbeat, but Hanfeng can see that maybe Homeless Joe has the necessary connections to get what he so badly needs. So, he approached the thug, referring to him as Brother Lai and saying that it's been a long time since they have seen each other. Hanfeng waved with an awkward smile as he was uncertain how this guy would respond. Brother Lai annoyedly asked if they knew each other as he walked closer. Being younger than Lai, he introduced himself as Zio Han, kind of like saying little bro. He swore that they'd met a while ago, so I must have forgotten. The thug complained that he's been swamped with work lately, so he can't be blamed for his bad memory. But he was pretty receptive to talk. Hanfeng was being overly cautious as he was about to ask for something very illegal. He surveyed the area, looking from left to right to make sure that no one could hear what he was about to say. Then, he came up to Brother Lai and directly asked for the weapon that he needed to defend himself in the coming days. Lai jumped in fright and asked what he would need a gun for. That's not a good sign. Feeling like a guilty criminal, Hanfeng still had to push through this as he couldn't think of anyone else who could help him with his problem. Lai started speaking seriously, wanting to clear something up before they got any further. He insisted that his organization does not engage in any illegal activities and that guns are serious business. He hinted that he had the connections for it, but he was not one to mix ordinary people up with something dangerous. Han Feng pushed the thug's questionable Louis Vuitton bag out of his face and insisted that Brother Lai got it all twisted. He was just inquiring about some firearms for self-defense, as he has been involved in some nasty personal grudge. And so, Han Feng started lying his ass off with a story that he was making up as he spoke. According to him, one day while riding his bike to work like usual, he ran into an old man who was just spitting everywhere on the bike line. It was so gross, and to make matters worse, the wind carried one of those disgusting globs of spit right into Han Feng's face when he was just minding his own business. Angered by the revolting old man, Han Feng threw his bike to the side and confronted the old man. What did the bastard do, you ask? The asshole decided to spit on him again while he was airing out his grievance. He could not take it anymore and brought down some street justice on the disgusting old man. He gave the guy a good old beating in the middle of the road with everyone watching on the sidelines. As the old man left with his clothes tattered and his face messed up, the bastard swore that he would get back at Han Feng for this humiliation. The very next day, that old man was patched up and waiting for Han Feng on the usual bike route. This time, he had some goons with him. They beat Han Feng up quite badly and threatened to do it again if they ever saw him anywhere. His clothes were a mess. His face was bruised and his body was wounded. He has never been so humiliated in his life. That is why he wants a weapon for self-defense. That's the long and short version of it. That's the story he could come up with on the spot, and it looks like it was a very effective one. Brother Lai was fuming in anger as he imagined the nasty old jerk spitting on the road and hitting Han Feng. Such uncivilized behavior should not be tolerated. That's not really the point of Han Feng's story, but at least he's getting somewhere. Brother Lai tapped his shoulders and assured him that this vendetta would be taken care of. He assured Han Feng that he's got our boy covered. He will just make a call to his big brother right now and they'll fetch that gun. Han Feng was starting to doubt if he made the right decision in approaching this guy. With all that tough talk, Brother Lai invited him to go to the station and hop on the bus with him. His excuse was that his Panamera was being serviced in the shop, so he couldn't drive to the headquarters. Han Feng assured him that transportation wouldn't be a problem. He has his car parked right to the side, after all. The brand new vehicle immediately caught the eye of this hype beast bum. On the drive over to his big brother, Lai could not stop going on and on about how Han Feng is living the good life and asked how much this new ride costs. It was about $700,000 of borrowed money. As he casually gave directions to turn left at the next intersection to reach the alleged office, Brother Lai kept on snapping pics of himself sitting in the new leather seats. His social media handle was Handsome Spicigai, and tonight's post was a picture of his dumbass face with a caption complaining about how his SUV seat is still too hard to sit in on, account of it being new. They pulled up to one of the seedier parts of the city. Some tough-looking guys were camped outside, complaining about the messed up weather. You can't blame them, though. It went straight from summer to hardcore winter overnight. Seeing some crisp-looking wheels pull up, everyone turned to whoever was about to exit that car. Seeing that it was Lai Z, they flocked towards him to ask what was up. Brother Lai just told them that he had some stuff to handle with Boss Liu. The other thugs assumed that the new Tiger SUV belonged to Lai and started hassling him about the price tag. Lai did not deny it at all. He even proudly boasted that he had spent 700 grand for the car. Han Feng was not upset, though. Bragging that you own the car so confidently while the actual owner is standing nearby is kind of a goated, shameless move. As soon as they entered the establishment, the one known as Boss Liu, a hardcore gangster-looking man, came out upset that Big Mouth Lai would disturb him so late in the evening. Brother Lai visibly turned a lot more reserved in front of the boss, even offering his cigs politely. The big guy does not have time for any of that filler nonsense, though. He's a busy man. Brother Lai introduced their little brother, Han Feng, as a buyer of something special, a gun. Boss Liu wanted to confirm if he heard that correctly. As soon as the big boss looked him over, Han Feng froze up in fear. He wasn't sure what would happen if he made the wrong move or said the wrong thing. Boss Liu just stared at him silently, cigarette in mouth, seemingly scrutinizing him from head to toe. Then the big guy cracked a smile. He was quite disappointed that Han Feng only needed a lousy gun when he was expecting something more interesting. He gestured towards one of his henchmen, Cheng Roman 11. The henchman already knew what to do and rummaged through his jacket pocket. He tossed a pistol on the table, and Boss Liu quoted a price, 6,000 for the handgun. Easy to conceal and reliable. Han Feng humbly rejected it as he was thinking more along the lines of something a little longer and bigger. He was not looking for some low-caliber pea shooter. He wanted something that requires a scope to fire. Boss Liu's expression turned grave as he stared at Han Feng intently. Our boy might have crossed the line unknowingly. He immediately shut up as if he just swallowed his tongue. The big guy started yelling about how unrealistic it is to demand a freaking sniper rifle like it was nothing. He's running a discreet business here. This is not some goddamn shopping mall where you get to pick and choose what kind of illegal product you get. Boss Liu's final offer is the pistol on the table. Take it or leave it. Brother Lai had to run some interference to try to calm the boss down. His idea of convincing the big guy to listen was to invent a backstory for Han Feng on his own. A made-up story that allegedly happened 5 years ago involving Han Feng's non-existent wife. Lai is quite a mouthy but talented storyteller. Under the relentless downfall of snow, the boss listened to his lies all the way to the end. The story must have been phenomenal as Boss Liu was so angered that he almost snapped the table in half. He kept repeating how disgusting those who had wronged Han Feng were. Apparently Han Feng had 3 kids with a non-existent wife, but it turned out that none of them were his. Han Feng just stood there and went with all the lies. Even for someone nicknamed Homeless Joe, this ridiculous story was too over the top, but it worked. Boss Liu gave his personal guarantee that Han Feng would get his sniper rifle as soon as possible. He promised that he would personally make it happen, but it might take a few days. Once again, the henchman Changzi will be arranging everything. Boss Liu wanted something semi-automatic with loads of ammo too so Han Feng could have what he needed. It's unexpected, but Brother Lai definitely came in clutch. The big guy also handed Han Feng the handgun. He wanted to give it for free. A gift from one man to another. Han Feng was speechless. The made-up story was so good that the boss had formed some kind of one-sided bond with him. Now that it was taken care of, the big guy got back on his phone to take care of his other, more pressing businesses. Before leaving, Han Feng wanted to return the favor a little bit. He stated that a buddy of his who works for the government had told him that due to the abnormal weather, purchase limits for supplies will be implemented soon, so it's best to stock up before that happens. Seeing the serious look in the young man's eyes as if he actually knew what he was talking about, Boss Liu could not help but take the tip seriously too. He nodded in understanding and remarked that he got it. And so, Brother Lai and Han Feng exited the center of the city's underbelly with one firearm secured. On the way back, Lai could not stop bragging about how he handled business like a boss, and it went beautifully. Now that his big brother, the big boss, is in a good mood, they could even ask that guy for a cannon and he'd say yes. Han Feng wanted to thank the thug by buying him some cigarettes. Brother Lai tried to be humble and insisted that he did what he did just to help him, but he would gladly take about 7 to 8 cartons of his beloved Huazi cigs. He even promised to take Han Feng to a sauna once he got paid for his so-called project. Our boy was already thinking about his next logical move. Supplies are secured and the weapon is obtained. He should be set for the early days of the apocalypse at the very least. He can focus on studying his abilities. Fully solving the food problem would make his long-term survival chances skyrocket. He was so absorbed in his own world while walking that he didn't notice an icy part on the ground and slipped. Han Feng was so concerned with survival that he failed to follow one of the ironclad rules in the upcoming ice age. Do not get injured. He fell quite badly. His leg must have absorbed the impact of the slip and had been damaged severely. Brother Lai didn't know what to do as he ran towards his new pal's side. This is bad. From the sharp pain he was feeling and the awkward landing, there was a very real possibility that his leg was broken. He shakily took his car keys out, handed them over to Brother Lai and requested to be taken to the nearest hospital as soon as possible. Lai just scratched the back of his head and admitted that he actually doesn't have a driver's license, insisting that he can't drive without one. But it's safe to say that this bum just can't drive. Period. At least he didn't leave Hanfeng on the floor to writhe in the pain of a broken leg. He offered his shoulders to lift Hanfeng up, but he struggled hard to do so. Both of them wouldn't make it to the hospital alive at this rate, so Hanfeng just called a taxi that he had to pay for since Lai is a broke bastard. Even the hospital, an essential establishment, was starting to freeze over under the intensifying blizzard. In the nurse's office, someone named Jian was left to take care of the night shift on this whiteout night. The snow was getting heavier and the roads were starting to get buried deep. Head nurse Jian had only just started her night shift, but calls coming from the hall were already flooding in as the emergency section was severely short-staffed. The pretty nurse had no other choice but to step up. Upon getting an X-ray in the hospital, it was confirmed that he had really broken his leg. The doctor explained that there was a stable fracture on his right tibia. It would be easy to set, but he'd need to stay for an hour of observation before going home with his meds. This accident could not have happened at a worse time. It just had to occur before the apocalypse went into full swing. While looking at his X-ray results, Hanfeng regretted being so careless. Brother Lai accompanied him for most of the process, but the dude had to leave as he apparently had a few deals to handle. He's a real one though, and he even left his number in case Hanfeng needed anything else. Now that he was alone in the hospital lobby, Hanfeng sighed heavily. He wondered how he could make such a stupid mistake at such a crucial time. Looking at the chaos around him was stressful. The hospital quickly overflowed with patients, victims of accidents caused by the sudden blizzard and quickly plummeting temperatures. Emergency beds lined the hallways as a grim testament to the worsening conditions outside. As for him personally, he just wanted to get his meds and leave this place as fast as possible before the roads closed for good. Thankfully, his idle time would not be boring as a goddess had just walked right in front of him. Head nurse Jian had come to bolster the understaffed emergency room. The first bed she checked had a patient with heavy wounds. Next on her rotation was bed 5, where a patient's wounds had just been cleaned. Thankfully, the vitals were stable. Bed 5 just needed another dose of glucose in 10 minutes. She advised the attending nurse that if the patient's heart rate dropped below 80, epinephrine must be administered immediately. Throughout the rounds of the head nurse, Hanfeng could not take his eyes off her. She was just amazing. Being a head nurse at such a young age, she must be a generational talent. On top of that, he saw how she dealt with all kinds of patients. She was kind and incredibly skilled. She looked like a radiant being in the middle of a hopeless place. Moreover, she was incredibly beautiful. She was working the hectic night shift, but her smile never faltered. She was basically an angel. He was so enamored that his eyes accidentally traveled to some ungentlemanly areas. Hanfeng immediately averted his gaze out of respect. But head nurse Jian was just way too unaware of her surroundings. A real airhead. Suddenly, the old man sitting beside him started calling the attention of the pretty head nurse. She was not really required to tend to the patients outside of her rounds, but she still took the call with a smile. Head nurse Jian politely apologized to the old man and asked if she could come back a bit later to help, as she still needed to provide urgent care to some patients to cover for the staff shortage. The old man complained that his back hurt too much. He explained that the back pain had been worsening lately and wanted the head nurse to take a look to see what was causing it. In reality, this bastard was just a dirty perv trying to film below her skirt. Not noticing what was really happening, Jian just smiled and apologized once again, saying that for such back problems, they might need to schedule an X-ray just to be sure. The old perv started getting pushy, urging her to just take a quick look as he pointed to where it hurt. The bastard even got up from his seat to touch the angelic nurse inappropriately. Being the airhead that she usually was, Jian just laughed as she was naturally ticklish. For back problems, it's really advisable to wait for the resident physician's exam. The perv started pushing it, his hand crawling even lower from her waist. This disgusting act would have continued longer if something or someone had not made it stop. A freaking flying crutch forcefully smashed against the old perv, giving him some real back pain and knocking the phone away from his hands. Ever the kind-hearted healthcare worker, Jian wanted to check if the old man was. Thankfully, Hanfeng came to her rescue, humbly apologizing for his crutch flying to the side, as this was the first time he was using one. He bent over and went straight for the old perv's phone while blatantly questioning if it was broken or not. Just as he was about to touch it, the perv started sweating nervously and screaming at him to stay away from the phone. Han Feng did not listen. He walked all the way to the side of the room, got his bandage all messed up, and wouldn't let this freaking lecher get away with doing something so disgusting. As soon as he opened the phone, his suspicions were proven right. He looked at the creep directly in the eyes. If looks could kill, the geezer would have died by now. The proof was already there on the home screen. This perv had some nerve filming up a hard-working nurse's skirt and even assaulting her. There's no good reason why Han Feng shouldn't call security and have them escort the bastard to a jail cell where criminals love putting pervs in their place. Han Feng would be keeping the phone, and the next time he saw this old creep again, he threatened to ruin his miserable and revolting life. The old bastard knew he had no other choice but to flee and never show himself near this place again, and it infuriated him. The first chance he got up from that hospital floor and bolted out of the door like his life depended on it. Meanwhile, head nurse Jaeon was just confused as to how someone complaining about severe back pain could run so fast. Han Feng was shocked to see a first-hand display of the most comically naive person he had ever met. He decided to show her what the old fart was doing with the phone, filming up her skirt. Based on her reaction, she really did not notice anything wrong going on. Han Feng handed her the phone with the video footage, so she could decide whether to wipe it or call the cops on the owner. He also reminded her to be more careful, so people like that perv wouldn't take advantage of her kindness. She smiled with the brightness of 1,000 stars, and then asked if Han Feng's leg was supposed to be injured. The adrenaline from catching that old perv in the act must have numbed the pain from his broken leg. But now that it was dealt with, the pain came rushing back in, and he screamed in agony. Thankfully, head nurse Jaeon was an expert when it came to mending these types of injuries, and quickly set the casting back in place. She looked at him and asked if it still hurt. Han Feng thanked her for dealing with his broken leg, and now it didn't hurt at all. At that moment, it was as if only the two of them existed in the crowded room. Jaeon returned the gratitude as she promised to never let such bad guys get away with messing with her anymore. She would punch them really well from now on. Han Feng just wanted her to be more aware of her surroundings. Seeing as she was letting his broken leg and feet touch her front pillows, it seemed like she had not learned anything at all. She was still as clueless and unaware as ever. While Han Feng's head was in the clouds, another nurse called for Jaeon as her help was needed on the emergency beds. Before going back to her rounds, the angelic head nurse reminded him not to forget to come back in a week to get his leg checked again. Han Feng promised that he would, but making any plans a week from now was unrealistic. He just smiled helplessly, for only he knew what was really going on in the world. He took the crutch that he smashed against the old perv and limped his way out of the hospital. Han Feng just accepted the fact that he wouldn't be able to see her ever again. The next day came, and the blizzard had not stopped. It had gotten even stronger instead. It had essentially frozen all infrastructure and services, making just going outside a dangerous challenge. On the morning news, emergency weather reports kept coming in about how, within the next 24 hours, all regions of the country would be experiencing heavy snowfall and a sharp drop in temperatures. Bizarre reports from overseas correspondents showed that temperatures were plummeting in every corner of the world. Dubai, Egypt, the Amazon basin, and places that should not be experiencing this type of phenomenon were seeing their landmasses buried in thick blankets of snow. The nation's experts, along with specialists from 46 other countries, were rushing to the United Nations to discuss the cause of the anomalous weather. Every network kept echoing that the experts said this severe cold snap wouldn't last too long. They always ended their news reports with a public service announcement to pay attention to disaster warnings and follow arrangements made by the local government. They kept reminding citizens to remain calm, avoid spreading or believing in unfounded rumors, and refrain from hoarding supplies and panic buying, as the disaster would soon pass. Warm, cozy, and sipping wine inside his decked-out home, Han Feng clicked his tongue. The government and media just kept lying through their teeth, feeding the public BS to maintain order. If he hadn't died and come back to life already, he might even believe them. But this time was different. He was well prepared for everything that was about to come. Supplies were fully stocked. The house was reinforced, and the heating system was working flawlessly. He had been so well prepared that there was nothing to worry about for the immediate future. His phone started buzzing incessantly with messages from the Happy Housing Complex residents group chat, discussing the weird weather and how the snow was already making the roads unusable. Everyone was clearly clueless about what was happening, but not the member nicknamed Mysterious Person. Whoever this was demanded everyone's attention to inform them that the snowstorm wasn't caused by normal weather patterns, but by something within the Earth itself. Mysterious Person proclaimed that everyone should heed his words as the Ice Age apocalypse was about to begin. No one was more shocked after reading those messages than Han Feng. Who the hell is this mysterious person, and how do they know anything about the apocalypse?